Hi, Shalom everyone. I'm going to continue the series over here of famous Yeshivot at the moment, different places that we're speaking about. Now we're talking about Yeshivat Bet Yaakov. This happened to stand. Remember, we spoke about Bet Yaakov Pereira, which would stand later on at a later stage in time for many hundreds of years, where great rabbis would learn at. But we didn't speak yet about Yeshivat Bet Yaakov or Midrash Bet Yaakov, which was standing between 1658 to 1690. So this was, I think, a sister or somehow connected to the Bet Yaakov that will actually form very shortly afterwards. It was a great yeshiva. It was a large yeshiva. During the 17th century, it happens to be. And I think it was actually founded by the famous Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz, if I'm not mistaken. They actually came from a great family that actually came from Livorno in Italy, we have to point out over there. בישיבה למדו תלמידים כמעט בכל הרמות והגילויים והיא חוכמה בעלי שם. Many different, let's say, great rabbonim that would actually learn inside this Talmudic academy, including Rabbi Cheskia di Silva, who was author of the Pri Chadash, Rabbi Moshe ben Habib, Rabbi Chaim Abu Lafia, and very, very interesting. I think Miyasad Yeshiva Yudi B'Tiberia. So it was actually in Tiberias itself. Remember, Tiberias is one of the four holy cities of Israel in itself, respectively. Now, it's interesting. It was a Sephardic yeshiva. I think it was founded by Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz, who we'll speak about in due course. They would learn Tanakh, they would learn Mishnah, and they would learn Talmud, and they would learn Halakha over there. There will be two Rosh Yeshivot at different times. Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz and Rabbi Moshe Gelanti over there. They have very great Talmudim, including Rabbi Moshe ben Habib, Rabbi Cheskia de Silva, and Rabbi Chaim Abu Lafia, who we mentioned about one other great Tzachim also. I think a book would actually be formed afterwards called the Hilchot Ktanot, very much connected to this. And this was, I think, in Venice in the year Heitaf Samach Dalet. Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz. הספר עוסק בפתרון לשאלות עניונות ששאל בישיבה בכל שבוע. Very interesting enough. So it was very much at the time of the Ottoman Empire. Yes. Let's explore a bit within regards to the history of this famous yeshiva in itself. So it was during the 17th century. At that point in time, Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz, who came from a great line of famous rabbonim that actually came, I think, from Fez, originally Morocco. Many of them would actually have the intention to come and make Aliyah to Eretz Israel, and I think on their way to Eretz Israel they will actually stop off in Salonika in Greece, and that was at that point in time in Greece. That was the center place of Torah across the world. It was where many people will learn Torah. There were great Talmudic academies. There were huge rabbonim at that point in time. הוא התרשם מקרוב מישיבותיה והמסדרים ששררו בהן למפות. בהשראת ההתרשמות בישיבות סלוניקי הוא הגה תוכנית לייסד ישיבה דומה בירושלים. So I think there were yeshivot in Greece at that point in time, so they would try and, let's say, replicate the yeshiva in the capital city, in holy city of Jerusalem. ופרסם את תוכניתו בערים שונות באימפריה העות'מאנית. Remember that point in time, Jerusalem, all these places were under Ottoman rule. לאחר שהסתובב בערי האימפריה העות'מאנית, who again Italy, they would actually arrive in Italy. Remember, Italy had a great Torah community at the time. And בספרו הוא מעלה על נס את משאלות ליבו להקים את ישיבה בירושלים. So I think they want to form this yeshiva in Jerusalem, and we can learn. We actually recorded a video before on the famous Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Pereira, which will actually form and be a famous yeshiva also in Jerusalem also. בלבונה הוא פגש שלושה אחים עשירים. He'd actually in Livorno meet three very wealthy people. אברהם ישראל, יעקב רפאל, משפחה וויגה. So from this famous family over there, they actually meet over there. אחים אלו הקדשו סכומי עתק בבנקים של ליבורנו ואמסטרדם למען הקמת בית מדרש בירושלים. So they would have vast wealth, let's just say, at that point in time, especially in the Netherlands and in Italy at that point in time, this famous family world connected to banks and Beit Midrash. So to make a Beit Midrash in Jerusalem, Ashi Yisrael Lanyei B'Chochmeha, Rabbi Yaakov Hotir Alehem, Rushem Az Behem Nertemu La'avot Gav, Kalkulei Yeshiva Shebderech. So that we very, very interesting at that point in time, how that we formed. So that's very, very interesting. So friends, anyone tuning in live, we're learning about the famous Yerushalayim Yeshiva in Jerusalem, Yeshivat Bet Yaakov, which was standing in the mid-1600s over here. So don't forget, anyone tuning in live, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button also to the channel. I think it was in 1658. He would actually go, Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov would go to Jerusalem, and he would form the yeshiva at that point in time. And they would call this yeshiva, Yeshivat Bet Yaakov, the house of Jacob. Not Shemo Yisod Yeshiva Hetiv, et Matzav Ha'anim Vatzoshvim, Vad Meirach Laktu, Ele Yudim Rabim. They would try to attract many of the, and they end up with some of the greatest students across the world who actually come there at that point in time. Then היה חכמים גדולים שעזבו את כבודם וקהילתם ובאו להסתובב בישיבה. Many people with great קהילות, great, let's say, congregations to actually come. כפי שמספר רבי משה גלנטי שהיה מתלמיד הישיבה, מתלמידי ישיבה. Remember, Rabbi Moshe Galanti was a famous rabbi in Jerusalem. חמיו של רבי ישראל יעקב, very interesting enough, בזיווג שני ממלא מקומו בהנהגת הישיבה שמיום שבה לעיר הקודש, רבי יעקב חגיס ירושלים. It's very very interesting. כמו הגאון המפורסם מרש ארגזי, זיכרונו לברכה, והגאונים מרא חנניה ומרא עמיגו. And we're going to speak about all these other rabbis that were very much connected to the same yeshiva. Yeshiva למדו תלמידי ירושלים מגיל הילדות ועד זקנה. So various Talmudim of all different ages over there will actually come and learn inside this Talmudic academy. יצאו ממנו תלמידים מפורסמים שהיו מנהגי קהילות בארץ ישראל ובתופסות וכן מחברי ספרים על התלמוד ופסקי ההלכות. Very interesting. They had a great curriculum in themselves of the highest level of Torah learning. That's something we very much have to point out over there. I think, so Al-Afsh Talmidei Yeshiva Yatzat Nevi Ushel. I think at that point in time, even some Talmudim that will end up following the Shabtai Tzvi, who was obviously a false messiah of Israel, especially Nathan of Gaza will actually be studying there, just as a side point at that point in time. But unfortunately, that's a whole topic in itself, where we spoke about that in the video we recorded about the Chacham Tzvi, and the video we recorded about other rabbis that were connected at that era time. Rav Moshe Chagiz would put Nathan, I think some of the writings of Nehemiah Hayun into a ban at that point in time. Nehemiah Hayun was a Sabbatian that was, let's say, very much connected, let's say, to the Sabbatian movement, and Nathan of Gaza or Natan Azati would actually be also connected later on, but he was a Talmud also of this place. ראש ישיבה כמה תלמידים הובילו התנגדות תקיפה לשבתי צבי וכמו מימן ומהם ידות ראשי ישיבה הרב חגיז והרב גלנטי רבי משה חגיז בנו של רבי ישראל יעקב ונכדו של רבי משה גלנטי ורבי שלמה אגזי. I think it was in the year 1674, the Rosh Yeshiva at that point in time, Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz, there was a passing over there, Niftar Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz, Vamshich Oto B'Tavkid Chamiv, Rabbi Moshe Galanti. So it would continue, let's just say, this prominent role. Remember, this was the premiership role of this, probably one of the most famous yeshivot of the world at that point in time. Who Amad B'Tavkid, Ad Lepitirato, B'Chaf Aleph Shvat. So it's actually interesting, friends. Rav Moshe Galanti passed away, I think, on the 21st of Shvat. So we're talking about we're at the time period of his Hilula, this specific week in itself. עוד לפני פטירתו התגאלו זכוכים לצורכי ישיבה ולאחר פטירתו פנו חלק מהחכמים בישיבה ליעקב אלזריש מבני משפחות וויגה. So remember, they were the philanthropist family that would very much help within regards to forming this yeshiva. ומנה מטעמה על עקצבים לקבע מינויו של רבי משה חגיז היורש. אלזריש הפסיק כנראה את התמיכה, וכחוצה מכך החלה הישיבה להתפרק, וחלק מהתלמידים עזבו את הלימוד ובנו להסכים. רבי משה ניסה להמשיך את קיום הישיבה ויצא לשם כך למצרים ולבונו, got to Egypt and to לבונו, Italy at the moment. נראה הוא שמאמציו בלבונו כמעט עשו פרי, אך I think it was in the year 1797, ארבעה חכמים מירושלים ששמם לא ידעו יצאו מכתב לבונו בו דרשו בתואנות שונות מגבירי המקום שלא למנות את רבי משה לשום תפקיד בירושלים. המכתב הוציא שם רעל. So very much at that point in time, I think the yeshiva will actually at that point will not continue in that continuous state, let's just say, in itself, in the year 1690. Then later on, a famous philanthropist, like literally at the same window of time, there'll be the Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Vega, which I think will be a sister school, let's just say, in of itself, that will actually form immediately after. So you could say they were very much connected together. Then there'll be the Yeshiva of Orach Chaim HaKadosh, which will be actually formed. I think it was called the Knesset Israel. I've just got to double check on that. We'll deal in that in the next coming minutes. So what was the curriculum of this yeshiva over there? Sidrei Alimut Gilim Hatzarim. על סדרי הלימוד הרואים לילדים ברמות השונות כותב. It was different levels of Torah learning at that point in time. רבי ישראל יעקב חגיס הוא מבחין בין תלמידים שאביו מייעד אותו להיות תלמיד חכם לבין תלמידים שמתעתד לצאת לעבוד לפרנסתו. אחר שיהיה קבע, so I think they would have different levels for the standards that different students were on over there at that point in time. So it was very broad yeshiva in itself, but it was yeshiva that will actually promote real excellence also at that point in time. L'mat Torah Nevi'im, they will learn Nevi'im, they will learn the Talmud. יכנסו אותו בלימוד קבע בגמרא עד שיהיה בן 20 שנה, יתמלא כיסוב ובקיאות בפלפל. They become deal in the Talmud also, דרך פלפול, analytically, and also והנהגתי מנהג זה בעיר ירושלים הקודש ירושלים. זהו למי שחננו, השם יתברך, ונתנו לו ולבנו הבנה שיהיה בעל תורה דווקא. So really promote החזונות also there, אבל בכללות ללומדים בתלמוד תורה, הוא יותר טוב שיצאתי לאבות הבנים, ולמלמדים הוא שיהיו בני מצווה, שיתעסקו עמהם בתנ"ך, תורה נביאים, עם פירוש, in regards to the great perushim of the Chazal in itself, מדרשות והאגדות, I'll be teaching the various medrashim and agadot, ופסקי דינים, מהלכות הנצרכות, לצורך הנהגת יהודית. בשלושה ימים, בשבוע ללמוד עמם כצד משנה, על פי רבנו עבודיה, זיכרונה לברכה, ומתם גמרא עם פירוש רש"י and other great rabbis, so they learn also over there. בנו, רבי משה חגיס, so the famous Rabbi Moshe Chagis, who we've spoken about on various occasions before, מושג כי אביו היה משתשש בתמריצים קצובים כדי לדרבן את תלמידיו לרגישות בקיאות נרחבה בתורה. היה משתדל בכל עוז של תורה עם התלמידים. Really, there was great effort on the תלמידים. מפריז להם מאוד כדי שישנו את כל הש"ס בעל פה. So very much encourage the great Talmudim to learn the entire shas בעל פה over there. ויש מהם שלצו בידם, ויש מהם שיזכו במקצת, יש מהם בשני סדרים. או מרי הרב המפורסם, מר זקני, רבי משה גלנטי, so the famous Rabbi Moshe Galanti is very much connected to it. In fact, I'm friendly with a descendant of him. היום אומר שכל סדר לימודו, אחד הספרים, עשה והצליח ועלו, ובאו בידו כמה וכמה מהם, שכמעט כל התלמוד היה שגור בפיהם. To really imbue the Talmud inside them in of itself. And כקורא את שמה, וכמה פסקי דינים, really to garner up the דינים themselves. ולא יאמין, כי יסופו אם לא שהוא היה רואה בעיניו סדר הנהגה. וההבחנה שהיה לו בתלמידים כדי להכיר ולהבחין כוח כלי הספירה של כל אחד ואחד, עד היכן הייתה מקעת ולהיכן הייתה נוטה. הוא ממשיך לתאר כי היה מכוון כל תלמיד לפי כישרונותיו, חלקם למשנה, חלקם לתלמוד, וחלקם לפסקי דינים. Over there, very interesting enough. So we're just exploring the, let's just say, the science behind the yeshiva in of itself. What was the learning schedule like over there, and so on and so forth over here, friends. And anyone tuning in live, we're exploring about the famous Bet Yaakov Yeshiva of Vega, also respectively over here. Very, very interesting. Sheila inanut al basis shvui. We're just exploring what are the different parameters with regards to learning structure of the week. Midday Shabbat, היה ראש ישיבה, רבי ישראל יעקב חגיס, מניח לפני התלמידים שאלה עיונית מאתגרת שהיה עליהם להשיב עליה. הוא עצמו כתב תשובות לשאלות, הן נתפסו לצד השאלות בספר הלכות קטנות. בשעה הספר נכתב, השבע הכין מדי שבת, בשבתו היום בשישי, להביא אל אוהל מועד, משכן העדות בית מדרש הגדול. מדרש בית יעקב, אשר היה בירושלים. שעה דפוס, I think this writings will be published in Venice, if I'm mistaken, in the year תס"ד. השאלות עוררו הדעים רבים, גם בין חכמים הגדולים, ואף ניתן למצוא את רובן מופיע, כמעט באותו הנוסח, בספריהם של חכמי ירושלים באותו התקופה. In themselves respectively. Okay, so לימודי חול, what about like secular education, also and stuff. בישיבה עסקו התלמידים, גם לימודי חול, שמציעים להבנה התורה. They would actually learn at that point in time, לימודי חול, actually secular subjects, which actually help within regards to Torah and stuff, logic, for example, maths, והנדסה. זה חכמת הטבע וחכמה האהלות. לימודים אלו היו ניצולים לתלמידים שלמדו תקופה מסוימת לימודי קודש. Interesting enough. So who were some of the famous Talmudim of this yeshiva? So we're going to explore about the history of some of them in a few minutes' time. Including Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Hagiz was a Rosh Yeshiva. The famous Rabbi Moshe Galanti, who was the author of a short of Chidushim novelties, and Chamiv Shel Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov El-Gazi, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Shlomo Al-Gazi was also the author of great books, let's say, on the Talmud, and like Rabbi Avram Amigo, Rabbi Avram Ibn Chanania, Rabbi Shmuel Garmezian, Mechaber Chiburim Rabim Al-Talmud, Pskei Halacha. There was other great Talmudim over there. Rabbi Yaakov Molcho, for example, Rabbi Yitzchak Poton was another one, if I'm not mistaken. There was Rabbi Moshe Ben Chabib, who was, I think, a Chatan of Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Hagiz, who was the author of great books, Al-Talmud, Halacha, Rishon LeZion. Rabbi Yosef, another great student was Rabbi Yosef Al-Moshnino, who was a rabbi of Belgrade, I think, at one point in time, and the author of the Shut Idut Yosef. Rabbi Chesky de Silva, also the author of the famous book, the Pri Chadash. Rabbi Chaim Abu Leafia, another great rabbi of his time. He was a rabbi of Izmir in Turkey, and was a very famous rabbi in Tiberias also. Rabbi David Kohen, the author of the book called the Da'at Kedoshim. Rabbi Moshe Hagiz, Beno shel Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Al-Gazi, if I'm not mistaken. He wrote different works in himself that was printed, I think connected to his father. And there's Knot Rabbi Moshe Galanti, another great rabbi that we learned to be part of the place. Rabbi Raphael Mordechai Malchi, who was a Rofeh and a Gvir, a very publicized one, let's just say himself. He would learn in Yeshiva in Jerusalem. Rabbi Chizkiah, this is Rabbi Moshe Hagiz. And also there was Nathan of Gaza, I think, would also learn that at one point in time. Unfortunately, he would veer off totally at that point in time, and the false Messiah, Shabtai Tzvi, at that point in time, that's the whole topic onto itself. Let's just speak a minute about the Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Vega, which was, I think, a sister yeshiva that will be formed straight after. I think they will change the name. So they were, I don't know how they were connected together, or maybe it was just one yeshiva under, they would just change name at that point in time. That was formed in 1691, literally immediately after the previous Bet Yaakov, which we're speaking about today. And I think that was actually formed by a famous Gvir of the name Yaakov Pereira from Amsterdam, if I'm not mistaken. And this was actually, the spearhead for this was Rabbi Chesky de Silva, who was very much part of the Bet Yaakov, the first one we're speaking about, who was author of the Pri Chadash himself. Yeshiva הייתה אחד ממוסדות התורה החשובות ביותר בירושלים, especially during that period. בין לימודות נמנו גדולי חכמים בירושלים. At that point in time, who was the Rosh Yeshivat at that point in time. It would stand for many years, this yeshiva. They included the Pri Chadash, Rabbi Yaakov Molcho, Rosh Yeshiva over there, Rabbi Avram Yitzchaki, Rabbi Eliezer Nahum, Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen Rapport, Rabbi Raphael Miuchas, Rabbi Yitzchak Kobo, Rabbi Avram Ashkenazi, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Mizrahi, Rabbi Yosef Yom Tov Miuchas, really all-star, great rabbis of yesteryear. Let's speak about this yeshiva over here, the Bet Yaakov Vega. It was in 1691. נשלח רבי חזקיה דה סילבה על ידי רבו רבי משה גלנטי בשליחות לארצות אירופה המערבית לשם עיסוק קסם ליהודי בירושלים. So actually they would go as שוחד רבנן to raise money for the people of Jerusalem. בשורתו באמסטרדם הוא פגש את הגביר רבי יעקב Pereira. He would actually encounter Rabbi Yaakov Pereira over there in Amsterdam. נדיב מורסם שתרים רבות למטרות צדקה באמסטרדם ובארץ ישראל. יעקב Pereira היה בנו של הגביר אברהם Pereira. He was the son of another famous גביר, Abraham Pereira. Mamruse's father actually came from at the time period of the Spanish Inquisition. She started, I think, in the year 1659, Yeshivat Chesed Abraham. So there was another yeshiva called Yeshivat Chesed Abraham in the city of Hebron, which I think was very much connected to Rav Avram Yisrael Zevi, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully we'll speak about this yeshiva at a later time. לאחר פטירת אביו בשנת תנ"ט, in 1699, הגדיל בנו יעקב את קרן הצמיחה ישיבה והרחיב אותו. מאז נקרא ישיבת חסד אברהם ואמת ליעקב. הפרי חדש הציע לגביר להקים ישיבה דומה בירושלים, שעמדו בו חכמי העיר ושתקרא עד שמו. I think it was until the year תמ"ט התקיימה בירושלים ישיבה ותיקה Bet Yaakov Vega. So this is what we're talking about this in today's one. She said that Avram Vega at that point in time, Milivona. So they're going to adopt the same names, these two yeshivot. So really, you could say they were totally connected together. In Piterato shel Rabbi Rosh Yeshiva Acharon, Rabbi Moshe Galanti, הישיבה נסגרה ונצור, הילל בעיר ישיבה, שתשמש את חכמיה. זה היה אפוא הרקע לצאתו של הפרי חדש. over here. So very, very much interesting that this yeshiva afterwards, Bet Yaakov Pereira, would have connections very much to it. So that's probably why they kept the same name in of itself. Let's explore about some of the... I wonder if the Bet Yaakov Girls System School was actually inspired by this original name in of itself. That I'm not too sure in of itself. Okay, let's speak about some of the rabbis that were very much connected to the Bet Yaakov Yeshiva. Obviously, the first one must speak about Rav Moshe ben Yonatan Galante. He lived between 1621 to the 4th of February, 1689. So we're around like his Hilula time period. He was a grandson of Rabbi Moshe Galante. I think the first one. He would serve as the first Rishon LeZion. Rabbi Moshe Galante. It was called the Magen, if I'm not mistaken, the initials of his name. And Rabbi Hizkiah de Silva was among his Talmidim, his disciple. So Rabbi Moshe Galante, he was a Rishon LeZion, very prominent position. He was born in the year 1621, and he died in 1689. I think he died in Jerusalem, part of the Ottoman Empire. His father was Rabbi Yonatan Galante, if I'm not mistaken. He would write great works, including the Zebach Hashlamim and the Korban Hagiga. He was known to be the first Rishon LeZion, chief rabbi of Israel. And his grandfather was another Rabbi Moshe Galante Harishon, the first one himself. He wrote the Zebach Hashlamim, which was, let's say, a harmonization of the biblical passages and biblical with Talmudic statements to it. I think this will actually be edited by his grandson, Rabbi Moshe Hagiz, in Amsterdam between the year 1707 to 1708, and the Korban Hagiga, which is a halachic and Kabbalistic novel which was printed in 1714. Some of his responsa are found in the works of contemporaries, and a volume of his responsa, I think, exists under the title Elef HaMagen, but has never been published, I think, in the year 1906. Over here. Now, another great rabbi that will be integral to Yeshiva was Rabbi Moshe Ibn Habib, another great rabbi at that time. He, I think, lived between, if I'm not mistaken, between 1654 to 1696. He was also a Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, Rishon LeZion, Chambashi, chief rabbi of the Ottoman Empire, and head of this major yeshiva. He was born in Salonika in 1654. That was also part of the Ottoman Empire. He died in Jerusalem in 1696. It's interesting. I think he would get married to the daughter of Rabbi Yonatan Galante also. And interesting, he had great children, including his daughter married another famous rabbi, Rabbi Machir Kuli, and another daughter would marry Rabbi Moshe Israel in himself. His parent was Rabbi Shlomo Ibn Habib. He would write great books, including the Get Pashut, the Ezrat Nashim, and the Shamot Ba'aretz. And he was known, let's just say, as an expert within regards to the laws of marriage and divorce. And he was a Rishon LeZion Chambashi. He was also related to Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Habib and Rabbi Yosef Ibn Habib also, if I'm not mistaken. It's very, very interesting. You can see so he, as we said before, he himself was born in Salonika in 1654. His father was obviously Rabbi Shlomo Ibn Habib, who was, let's say, a scion of the distinguished family that was, obviously, there was Spanish Inquisition, so they were forced to move from Spain. Among his forefathers, I believe, included Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Habib, who was the author of the En Yaakov, and Rabbi Yosef Ibn Habib, the author of the great commentary called Mukhe Yosef. When he was 15 years of age, Moshe would move to Yerushalayim, where he would enroll in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yaakov Hagiz. Over there, he would marry the daughter of Rabbi Yonatan Galante, whose son, Rabbi Moshe Galante, the Rishon LeZion, was known as the Magen. And both of the Ibn Habib's daughters would marry prominent scholars, including Rabbi Machir Kuli, who was was the father of the famous scholar called Rabbi Yaakov Kuli, who would initiate the collection of the Mamluas. And there was another famous rabbi called Rabbi Moshe Israel. Interesting enough, who was a minister of the communities of Tzfat and Jerusalem to the diaspora Jewry. That's something that we very much have to point out over there. Now, when he arrived in Jerusalem, he was very young, obviously, very young age. Rabbi Ibn Habib was immediately recognized for his great talents. He was, let's say, there was distinguished Jerusalem scholars such as Rabbi Hizkiah de Silva, who was the author of the Pri Chadash, Rabbi Ephraim Navon, who was the author of the Machaneh Ephraim, and even a great rabbi of himself, Rabbi Yaakov Hagiz, that recognized him as the equal and maintained halachic discourses with him. At some point, Rabbi Ibn Habib was sent as an emissary to the Jewish community of Turkey. However, I think, other than the fact of his dispatch, nothing else I think is known about this period of life of his. His brother-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Galante, died in 1689. Rabbi Ibn Habib was appointed the Rishon LeZion and head of the yeshiva in his stead. His various different colleagues on the rabbinical court in the Bet Din included various other great rabbis, including Rabbi Yaakov Molcho, Rabbi Yom Tov, Zahalon, and Rabbi Yosef Bar Yosef. Interesting enough, so very interesting. He was very obviously young, so he was known, let's just say, for his erudition and his great scholarship in all areas of the Torah, respectively. His primary expertise was in the area, let's just say, of laws of, let's say, Kiddushin and Girushin, marriage and divorce, let's just say, and in, let's say, thorny areas of the laws dealing with agonot. He authored 2 works in this area, the Get Pashut and the Ezrat Nashim, which remain standard references in these areas to this day. It's actually interesting. Rabbi Ibn Habib wrote another work entitled Shamot Ba'aretz, which contains, let's say, his Talmudic novel. The work, I think, is divided actually into 3 sections. The Yom Teruah, which is a novel, let's say, on Tractate Rosh Hashanah, the Tosfot Yom HaKippurim, which is on Tractate Yoma, and the Kapot Temarim, which will be on Tractate Sukkah in of itself. Now, let's just say, the work obviously been highly respected among Talmudic scholars, obviously since its publication, and it has been the subject of an aval by Rabbi Akiva Eger and Rabbi Yosef Saul Nathanson. I think this manuscript of its responsa was lost at sea, part survived and was published under the title, let's just say at that point in time, Kol Gadol, the Great Sound, in the year 1907 in Jerusalem. Now, Rabbi Ibn Habib served as rabbi and Jerusalem and head of Yeshiva until the day he passed away in 1696. That was his 43rd birthday. I don't think he didn't end up living to see any of his manuscripts published. However, his grandson, his daughter's son, Rabbi Yaakov Kuli, would edit his manuscripts and saw to the publication. Remember, Yaakov Kuli will be the author of the Mamluas. At the time, there was no printing press in Jerusalem, and Rabbi Yaakov traveled to Constantinople with a manuscript to try to get it published. Although he arrived there in 1714, the manuscript was only published in 1725, 25 years after the author's death, and the publisher cited the help of Rabbi Chaim Al-Fandari, another great rabbi who's spoken back here on this series on various occasions before, also their friends. Now, another famous rabbi that was connected to Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Vega was Rabbi Hezkiah de Silva. Now, he would also be connected to the Bet Yaakov Pereira, also very much so. He lived also not such a long life, between 1659 to 1698. He was a rabbi and a Jewish author that was born in Livorno, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. He was the son-in-law of the Dayan, Rabbi Mordechai Raphael Malachi, if I'm not mistaken, over there. So who was he? He was born in 1659 in the Grand Duke of Tuscany. I think when he was 20, in the year 1679, Rabbi de Silva left his native city for Jerusalem in, let's say, the then Ottoman Syria. He would attend that yeshiva of Rabbi Moshe Galanti for 10 years. He'll be there for in the Bet Yaakov yeshiva over there. You can see what an impact this yeshiva would end up having. In 1689, Rabbi Galanti died, and Rabbi de Silva succeeded him as a Rosh Yeshiva. He was sent to Europe to collect funds for Jerusalem. Now, I think in 1691, when Rabbi de Silva was in Amsterdam, he received an offer to become the city's Sephardic rabbi. He would refuse that. Instead, he began the printing of his work, the Pri Chadash, a commentary on the Yoredea. And let's say wealthy Amsterdam Jews offered to finance the publication. I think the Pri Chadash was published actually in 1691, and immediately was, let's say, hailed by European Torah scholars as, let's say, a monumental contribution to the world of halacha. Rabbi de Silva remained in Amsterdam for an entire year. On his way back, he visited Egypt, where I think the Torah scholars were incensed that he referred in his work to early scholars in what they felt was made more in a disparaging manner. Let's say there was at that point in time, just reading from Wikipedia here, a brazen question of the authority of the Code of Jewish Law as a law of codification and the final arbiter of Jewish law. Remember, the writings of Pri Hadash are in pretty much all the Shulchan Aruch's Code of Jewish Laws nowadays. So it's a colossal, great Torah in itself. The freedom with which Rabbi Silva discussed halakhic problems brought, let's say, a questioning of the rabbis of Cairo, Egypt, upon his Pri Chadash. It was afterwards removed by Rabbi Avram Halevi, although two men spiritually akin were personally unacquainted, I believe, at that point in time. Now, this was a great work there. Pri Chadash was in so nice. When he arrived back in Jerusalem, Rabbi Hezkiah opened the doors of the Yeshivat Bet Yaakov at that point in time. So I think this was the one of Pereira, which was immediately afterwards. Now, Robert de Silva had secured the ongoing support of the Dutch philanthropist Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Pereira while in Amsterdam, and in Robert Pereira's honor, the yeshiva was renamed Bet Yaakov Pereira. So remember, And this yeshiva was, so it's the same yeshiva, it just changed the name at that point in time. So really, if you actually look at it, it was one big yeshiva since 1658. Rabbi de Silva decided interest, let's say, there was very robust debates at that point in time, especially between Rabbi Moshe Hagiz and Rabbi Judah וויגה at that point in time. Now, I think he died in the year 1698. He was 39 years of age, and I think he was buried in Har Hazeitim, Mount of Olives. So Rabbi de Silva's wife was someone named Rabbanit Chana de Silva. She was a sister of the wife of Rabbi Moshe Hagiz, if I'm not mistaken. And in 1683, they had a son, Rabbi David de Silva, who became known as the Pri Hadas. Also, so very, very interesting, great works. So which books did he write? There was a Pri Hadash. Rulings obviously are very frequently quoted. For example, by Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz in his Kreti Upleti, and Rabbi Yosef Teomim in his Pri Megadim. And today the Pri Chadash is printed in the standard edition, obviously, the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch, and widely studied by various different rabbinic scholars. There's a Pri Torah, a work on the Code of Jewish Law by the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. This will actually speak about Rabbi de Silva's rulings. Rabbi de Silva was likewise author of the Mayim Chayim, Living Quarters, which collects obviously a notes on Talmudic treatises and the Yad of Maimonides, and would also author several responsa. Now the Pri Chadash was supplemented by a second and third part, edited by his son Robert David de Silva. The work bore appropriation of the chief authorities of the time, Amsterdam. This was between 1706 and 1730. And Robert David de Silva expressly states that he was a teacher at Jerusalem, not a rabbi, but despite, let's say, this Lunk's claims that he was chief rabbi of Jerusalem and that he died in 1790. This is just in parentheses, reading from Wikipedia over here. Now, another famous rabbi that was part of this yeshiva was a famous Rabbi Chaim Ben Yaakov Abulafia. He was born in 1660. He died in 1744 in Tiberias in Ottoman Syria. He was a great rabbinic authority at that point in time. And actually, we're going to just take a short 1 minute break at the moment. We're going to come back in 1 minute. So in the meantime, please subscribe to the channel. I'll be back in just 1 minute, friends, over here. So please subscribe in the meantime.
עכשיו היא לא נמוכה שם.
Hi, shalom everyone, thanks for that. At the moment, so we're exploring the history of Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Vega over here on this special edition. We're speaking about some of the famous rabbis over there. We're speaking about Rabbi Chaim ben Yaakov Abulafia. He was born in 1660. He died in 1744 in Tiberias, which is part of Ottoman Syria. He was a rabbinical authority. He was a grandfather of Rabbi Chaim Nissim Abulafia and the grandson of Rabbi Isaac Nissim ben Gami, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Rabbi Abulafia was a rabbi in Smyrna, where he instituted many wholesome, let's say, various different takanot regulations. And when it was 1740, he restored the Jewish community in Tiberias. A very great rabbi. He was born in Hebron, which was part of the Ottoman Empire, and he died in Tiberias, Ottoman Syria. He was about 83, 84 years of age at that point in time. He had great Torah colossal works, including Mikrei Kodesh, Yosef Lekach, the Yashresh Yaakov, and the Shvut Yaakov also, respectively. This Mikrei Kodesh was written, I think, was from 1729, if I'm not mistaken. The Yosef Lekach was from 1730 to 1732. This was in 3 volumes on the Torah. The Yashresh Yaakov, Jacob will take root, was in 1729, and the Shvut Yaakov was in 1733, which was a commentary on the Haggadah compilation of the En Yaakov by Rabbi Yaakov ibn Habib, let's just say, in of itself over there. Now, another famous rabbi at that point in time was Rabbi Yaakov Hagiz, which was in the year, he lived between 1620 and 1674. He was a Talmudist. He was from Fez. Originally the family was, he was born in Fez in 1620. He died in Constantinople, I think part of Turkey, part of the Ottoman Empire. And he got married to the daughter of David Karigal, Rav David Karigal, if I'm not mistaken, at that point in time. So he had great children. So, for example, his daughter married Rabbi Moshe ibn Habib. Another one of his daughters married Rabbi Moshe Hayun. Also, he had great works himself: the Tichilat Chochmah, the Ora Mishor, the Patil Tzechelet, and the Etz HaChayim. And he was very known for Rabbi Yaakov Hagiz for opposing the false heretic Messiah of Shabtai Tzvi. Very numerous Talmudic and rabbinical writings he actually wrote himself. I think he was actually related somehow to Nehemiah Hayon, who would also become a Sabbatean at a later stage in time, I point out. So who was Rav Hagiz? Rav Hagiz's teacher was someone named Rav David Karigal, who afterwards became his father-in-law. I think in the year 1646, Rav Hagiz went to Italy for the purpose of publishing books. He would remain there until the year 1656. He supported himself by teaching Rabbi Samuel Dipam, who was a rabbi at Livorno, and calls himself a pupil of Hagiz himself, thus. I think it was the year 1657. I'm just reading this from Wikipedia if anyone wants to know at the moment. And anyone tuning in live at the moment, please subscribe to the channel. It was in the year 1657 Rav Hagiz left Livorno for Yerushalayim, where the famous וויגה brothers of Livorno had founded the Bet Midrash for him. That was the famous one, Bet Yaakov, which we just spoke about before, and where he became a member of this great rabbinical college. There are, I think, a large number of eager young students gathered about him, among whom were Rabbi Moshe ibn Habib, who became his son-in-law, and Rabbi Yosef Almo Nino, who became the rabbi of Belgrade. Another son-in-law of his was Rabbi Moshe Hayun, who will become the father of Nehemiah Hayun, who we spoke about before, will become a Sabbatian afterwards. Another prominent student of his was Rabbi Avram Nathan ben Elisha Chaim Ashkenazi, known as Nathan of Gaza. He also was he would serve the prophet of Shabtai Tzvi, so there'll be connotations and family members connected also to the heretic Shabtai Tzvi, we have to point out also over there. Now, Yaakov Hagiz was an active in opposition to the Shabtai Tzvi and put him under a ban. So you can see, despite the relative over there, he saw the danger within regards to Shabtai Tzvi over there also, we have to point out. Now, I think it was in the year 1673, Rabbi Hagiz went to Constantinople to publish his Lechem HaPanim book, showbread, as they say it in himself. But I think he died there before this was accomplished. This book, as well as many others, would end up getting lost. He wrote the Tehillat Chochmah, which was a Talmudic methodology, published together with Shimshon of Chinon Sefer Kritut. This was in 1647, Amsterdam in 1709, and Warsaw later on 1884. The Ora Mishor, which was on the conduct, let's just say, of rabbis. I think there was an appendix also with additions of Rav Moshe Hagiz in 1709. The Petilt Chelet on Asarot of Solomon Gabriel, which was printed in 1652, and the Etz Chaim, which was in Livorno in the year 1654, if I'm not mistaken, later in Berlin in 1716. And Rabbi Hagiz also translated Menorat HaMaor of Rabbi Isaac Aboab into Spanish in 1656. Now, another great student of this Bet Yaakov Yeshiva was Rabbi Abraham Amigo, who lived in 1610 to 1683. He was a noted rabbi of Sephardic descent. He lived in Palestine during the middle of the 17th century CE, and he was contemporary of Rabbi Moshe Ben Nissim Benavisti, the younger author of the responsa called the Sefer B'nai Moshe. He was born in 1610 in Constantinople, Adrianople. He died in 1683, he was about 73 years of age. He was author of the Peri Chadash, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Rabbi Amiga would migrate to the region in 1655. He settled in Jerusalem, where he became friends with another person, Rabbi Yaakov Ben Chaim Zema. Let's take his piety learning. Rabbi Amiga was very respected by his contemporaries. He wrote the Peri Chadash, a commentary on the subdivision of the Orach Chaim, of the Shulchan Aruch, from the laws of the Pesach to the end, and the work, I think, had been lost. And Rabbi Amiga was also the author of a large work containing responsa as well as a novel to the Talmud and Halachic literature, which came under notice of Rabbi Azileh at that point in time. Now, another famous rabbi connected to the Yeshiva was Rabbi Shmuel Gar Mison. Who was he? He was a Jewish scholar. He was a rabbi that lived in Ottoman Syria during the 17th century. He was a native of Salonika. He would settle in Jerusalem, and he became a rabbi. Let's say of his numerous works, only two of these works, and the manuscript, the Imre Bina, which is a novel, let's say, on Talmudic treatises, and the Imre Noam, which was homilies, was the second part of the latter, is in the possession of the Chacham Bashi, Al Yashar in Yerushalayim. In the latter work, the author quotes three others, the Imre Yosher, the Imre Emet, and a commentary on the Tur Choshen Mishpat. Now, another famous rabbi there was Rabbi Raphael Mordechai Malki. He lived between 1640 to 1702, 62 years. He was a rabbi of law. He was a rabbi, and he was not just a congregation figure, he was also a doctor. He actually moved from Italy to Jerusalem in 1677. He was known as one of the most famous rabbis of the world until he passed away. He wrote a Perush on the Torah. Very interesting enough. So born in 1620, he died, he was 62. He would become a great rabbi in Jerusalem also. He lived at a time period in his generation of Rabbi Ezra Malki, the Pri Chadash, Rabbi Moshe Hagiz, obviously we've spoken about before. Rabbi Raphael Mordechai Malki was born in 1640, and they actually came from a family from the Spanish Inquisition. Let's say, Mishpachat Anusim, V'chetzi Ha'ivri, Sham Chai, Chelek Machayav, מצרי בחברה נוצרית. לאחר זמן מה השב ליהדות פרק ארוך עבר עליו באיטליה. So some of the family got to Italy, וקרוב לבדי שבארץ זו רכש את כשירותו הרפואית ואת ניסיונות. He became a doctor who עלה לירושלים מאיטליה, go to Jerusalem from Italy in 1677. ובה התבלט בהיותו איש הלכה ורופא מובהק. So he became an expert doctor there and a rabbi. Until he passed away in 1702. Now, Rabbi Raphael Mordechai היה בעל נכסים. נמנה עם ראשי הקהילות היהודית בירושלים. He was the head figure in Jerusalem. ונהג לרופא חולים ללא שכר. So he worked as a doctor without pay. הוא הוזמן לטפל ברבי יהודה חסיד, if I'm not mistaken. He would actually treat רבי יהודה חסיד, שחלה אם הגיעו לירושלים בראש חודש סיוון, בשנת, I think in the year 1700. כתב פירוש על התורה, חיבר על כללי של שאלות ותשובות, ומרים ברפואית, כתב רופאים ולקטים נשלמים ימות רב כולל באודות מצב רופאים בירושלים בזמנו. They're very interesting enough. So we're just going to take another short break for a minute, and we'll be back. So very interesting. Yeah, let's go for it. Hi, shalom everyone. Thanks for being patient. We just took a break over here. So we was just speaking about Rabbi Raphael Mordechai just for a few minutes over here. Malchi, it was a great rabbi. He, as I said before, he was connected to the Yeshivat Bet Yaakov, which we're speaking about at the moment, and very much the yeshiva in of itself, connected once again to Rabbi Chizkiah de Silva, and various great rabbis at that point in time, and very much be part of the Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Pereira also. And who was among his family, let's just say, his son was Rabbi Raphael Mordechai Malchi, would actually continue, let's just say, his workings with regards to the congregation. Rabbi Ezra Malchi, who was the author of the book called the Shem Lema'or, a Perush lesson on the Haggadah of Pesach, and the Chibur on the Rambam, and writings on the Rambam wrote in Machli Malki Kodesh. And I think another one of his sons, Rabbi Moshe Malchi, was a head of Kehila of Tzfat in of itself. One of his son-in-laws was Rabbi Chizkiah de Silva, the author of the Pri Hadash, and Rabbi Moshe Chagiz in of itself respectively. So you can see various different great rabbis would actually come, and very happenings would actually come from him in of itself. So very, very interesting. Today here on this special edition, speaking about the famous Bet Yaakov Yeshiva over here, arguably one of the most famous yeshivot there was in Jerusalem, in Jewish history, or various points in time. And we did record a video with regards to the Bet Yaakov Pereira, which I recommend. It was a brief video, actually. We recorded about 8 months ago, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd recommend everyone to actually look into that. And yeah, that maybe I'll try and put a link of that here on the section in of itself. So very, very interesting. Remember, there were various other great yeshivot that was in Jerusalem, including the famous Yeshivat Bet El, for example, which was a famous yeshiva, and that was around that point in time. And then many other yeshivas will stem from these great yeshivot of yesteryear, which is very interesting. Now, friends, over here, we are a community. We are exploring in regards to the great rabbis of yesteryear. We are at pretty much an online encyclopedia where we're examining who were the famous rabbis of yesteryear in various different countries all across the world. We've recorded biography videos of approximately 1,400 rabbis